We are looking at a truly fascinating document.
It really is.
It's a simulated, highly detailed interview with Friedrich Hayek. And for anyone who might need a quick historical refresher, Hayek is the legendary economist, right? The author of the 1944 classic, The Road to Serfdom.
A monumental book.
Yeah. So in this simulation, Hayek is basically evaluating the real-world economic agenda of Donald Trump. And the mission of this deep dive today is to step entirely out of the noisy, partisan 24-hour news cycle.
Right, which is so hard to do.
It is. But we are going to analyze these modern policies strictly through Hayek's cold, historical, and highly analytical lens.
Which is just a remarkably clarifying way to look at things, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
By removing the immediate emotion of the current political moment, we can look at the structural underlying logic of the policies themselves. We can focus on how the mechanisms actually work in reality.
And before we jump in, because this source deals with incredibly charged left-wing and right-wing paradigms, we really need to set some ground rules right at the top of this deep dive.
Absolutely. This is crucial.
Neither of us are taking sides today. I mean, we aren't endorsing any politician, any party, or any policy mentioned in these documents. We are simply acting as neutral guides.
Completely neutral.
Right. We're using Hayek's framework as a completely impartial lens to look at the math, the mechanics, and the historical context of these ideas.
Yeah, our only job here is to impartially unpack the economic arguments exactly as they are laid out in the simulation, just exploring why these policies function the way they do.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We are leaving the political team squirts at the door today.
That's good.
And the source starts with perhaps the most dramatic, heavily debated policy on the table right now, which is tariffs.
Right. The big one.
Yeah. The policy, as it's outlined, is to place very heavy taxes, in some cases, over 100% on imported goods.
Which is massive.
It's huge. And the stated argument for this policy is that it protects American workers. It forces companies to bring manufacturing home. And, it punishes countries like China that have historically treated America unfairly through heavy state subsidies.
And what's really fascinating here is Hayek's immediate, almost visceral reaction in the text.
Oh, yeah. He does not hold back.
No, not at all. He doesn't view this as a modern economic solution in any way. He actually categorizes it as mercantilism.
Right.
He argues this is essentially 16th century thinking.
16th century. He just bypasses the 20th century entirely and goes straight back to the 1500s.
Because the underlying philosophy is ancient, really. Mercantilism is the notion that trade is a zero-sum game.
If I win, you have to lose.
Exactly. It operates on the belief that a nation grows wealthy by keeping foreign goods out, hoarding gold, and basically hoarding all production inside its own borders.
But didn't we move past that?
Well, Hayek points out that this exact economic framework was thoroughly dismantled by Adam Smith, all the way back in 1776.
Right, in The Wealth of Nations.
Yes. Smith proved that wealth doesn't come from hoarding. It comes from comparative advantage.
Meaning, what exactly?
It means if another country can produce a component cheaper than you can, you buy it from them. And then you focus your own resources on what you do best.
That makes sense.
But Hayek's primary critique in the simulation, it actually goes beyond just the history of trade theory. It is fundamentally about who is allowed to make decisions.
Okay.
He argues that tariffs use the brute force of the state to decide, from above, which industries survive and which do not.
So it basically replaces the organic judgment of millions of consumers with the centralized judgment of the government.
Precisely. The government is essentially picking the winners and losers.
Right.
So if you're a manufacturer and you want to buy cheaper foreign steel to build your cars, the government steps in and says, no, we are protecting the domestic steel industry, so you are legally penalized for buying elsewhere.
Okay, but to push back a little on behalf of the listener, but foreign subsidies are a very real problem in the global market, right?
Oh, without a doubt.
The source explicitly acknowledges that countries like China heavily subsidize their industries with state money. So that is absolutely not a free market either.
No, it's not.
So think of it like this. If a neighboring town is using their taxpayer money to artificially lower the price of their apples,
Okay, yeah.
and they start flooding our town with incredibly cheap apples, building a massive wall around our town so we have to buy our own expensive apples, that doesn't actually solve the underlying problem, does it?
Not at all.
It just means you and I pay more for apple pie at the bakery.
That's a great way to put it. And in the simulation, Hayek fully admits that foreign subsidies do distort global trade. It is a real problem.
Right.
But he argues that the answer to one government's market distortion is not your own government's counter-distortion.
Like fighting fire with fire, but you just end up burning down the house?
Exactly. The source actually uses a really great metaphor to explain the mechanics of this. Two men pulling a rope in opposite directions do not create order.
Oh, yeah.
They create a tug of war that exhausts everyone, slows down innovation, and frankly, enriches neither side.
Because two wrongs don't make a right, economically speaking. You don't fix an unfree market in Asia by creating an unfree market in North America.
Right. And this brings us to the most critical mechanical reality of Hayek's analysis here. He points out that ultimately, tariffs are nothing more than taxation by another name.
Because the company importing the goods doesn't just, like, eat a 100% tax out of the goodness of their hearts.
No, of course not. They pass it on.
Right. If a retailer imports a blender that usually costs $20 and the government slaps a $20 tariff on it, the retailer just changes the price tag to $40.
Always. Without exception. The consumer, the ordinary person listening to this right now, is the one who pays the price of every tariff when they check out at the hardware store or the grocery store.
So the narrative's about foreign policy, but the reality hits your wallet.
Exactly. So while the political rhetoric focuses on punishing foreign countries or protecting domestic jobs, the mathematical reality is that a tariff functions as a massive regressive tax increase on the domestic population.
Okay, so if tariffs are essentially a massive hidden tax collected at the border, that brings up a pretty glaring contradiction with the next big domestic policy on the agenda.
The tax cuts.
Sweeping tax cuts.
Yeah.
The policy proposes significant reductions in taxes for corporations and higher earners. And the argument is that freeing up this capital will organically create jobs and drive massive economic growth.
Right.
Now, on the surface, this sounds like it would align perfectly with Hayek's free market philosophy, doesn't it?
It does, in principle. In the text, Hayek agrees that resources left in the hands of private individuals and private enterprises are almost always allocated far more efficiently.
More efficiently than if they were channeled through a sprawling government bureaucracy, you mean?
Yes, because you inherently know how to spend your own paycheck to improve your life better than a distant official in Washington does.
Makes total sense.
It is a fundamental expansion of individual choice. When the state takes less of your labor, you get to decide more about your future.
Okay, but there's a catch here, right?
A massive one, yes. Hayek introduces a critical caveat regarding the underlying mechanics of how these tax cuts are actually funded in reality.
So it's like, okay, it's like quitting your weekend job so you can enjoy more free time, but keeping the exact same credit card spending habits you had when you were working 7 days a week.
That is exactly what it's like.
You feel richer today because you have your weekend back, but, the monthly bill's still coming.
And if you don't cut your spending, you are going to default. Hayek states this economic law very clearly in the source. A tax cut that is not accompanied by an equal proportional reduction in government spending is not actually a tax cut at all.
Wait, really? What does he call it?
He calls it a deferred tax.
A deferred tax.
Right.
Because the government hasn't stopped spending the money, they just aren't collecting it from your paycheck right now.
Exactly. You cannot truly liberate an economy by borrowing against its future on a multi-trillion-dollar scale.
Right.
If the state continues to spend heavily on the military, entitlements, and infrastructure while bringing in significantly less revenue, that spending gap must be paid for eventually.
The math has to math.
It does. And Hayek outlines the mechanics of how that bill comes due. It happens through issuing national debt, through future taxation on the next generation, or, most insidiously, through inflation.
Okay, let's drill down into that inflation piece for a second, because that is how this actually hits the listener's wallet today.
Absolutely.
If the government is spending trillions more than it takes in, and they don't want to raise literal taxes to cover the gap, they often rely on the central bank to essentially print more money to cover the deficit.
Which increases the total supply of money in the economy without increasing the actual amount of goods and services.
Right. So more dollars are suddenly chasing the exact same amount of groceries or cars or houses. Prices naturally surge upward.
They have to.
So your paycheck might look exactly the same, but your rent and your grocery bill go up by 20%. That 20% loss in your purchasing power is the exact amount the government, quote unquote, taxed you to pay for their deficit spending.
It is an invisible tax. So feeling richer today by swiping the national credit card just means that your purchasing power will be eroded tomorrow.
Wow.
It is the illusion of free money. And Hayek views it as a structural trap.
So, if the government actually must slash its spending to make those tax cuts functionally real without triggering massive inflation.
Which is a big if.
A huge if. But that brings us to a major new initiative in the source material, the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE.
Yes.
And we really need to be clear about the scale of this. This isn't just like a minor oversight committee trying to save a few bucks.
Oh, no. The stated goal here is to slash trillions of dollars from the federal budget. They want to dismantle entire regulatory agencies and aggressively shrink the domestic footprint of the administrative state.
Right. But looking at this through Hayek's lens exposes a profound structural contradiction in this agenda.
It is the central paradox of the entire platform, actually.
Right. Because on one hand, you have DOGE aggressively tearing down the domestic state's power, trying to remove bureaucrats from the economy.
Yeah.
But on the exact same day, you have tariffs aggressively expanding the state's power, putting bureaucrats in charge of international trade.
So wait, is Hayek saying that a politician championing free markets and slashing domestic agencies is actually using the exact same playbook as a socialist central planner when it comes to imports?
Yes. This is where we reach the absolute core of Hayek's philosophy from The Road to Serfdom. He warns that the rhetoric of freedom and the actual practice of freedom are frequently total strangers in politics.
Total strangers. I love that phrasing.
It's so true, though. The politician who shouts the loudest about economic liberty is often the one most willing to use sweeping state power,
Yes.
as long as it is his faction wielding that power. Meaning, they don't fundamentally object to government intervention. They just want to be the ones deciding who gets intervened upon.
Precisely. Hayek argues that tariffs are central planning. I mean, think about the physical mechanics of a tariff regime.
Yep.
A government bureaucrat is literally putting their hand on the scale of the economy. The state is declaring, we will protect this specific industry, we will punish that specific trading partner, and we will legally determine what materials our citizens may and may not buy, and at what artificially inflated price.
So the mechanical mechanism of control is identical, whether it is implemented in the name of socialism or implemented in the name of economic nationalism.
The mechanism is all that matters. Hayek says it does not matter if the leader pulling the levers calls himself a champion of the free market.
Right.
Hayek doesn't judge an economy by reading a politician's press releases. He looks at a simple binary metric. Is the actual domain of individual choice expanding, or is it contracting under these specific decisions?
That's a great metric.
It cuts right through the noise. When the government tells you what you are allowed to import and forcibly inflates the price you pay, your domain of choice is contracting. Period.
Okay, so far, Hayek's analytical framework has systematically dismantled the tariffs as massive hidden taxes. It's exposed the tax cuts as deferred inflation traps if spending isn't slashed. And it's pointed out the glaring contradiction of using central planning in the name of patriotism.
It's been pretty thorough.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal.
So is there anything in this agenda that actually expands the domain of individual choice, according to Hayek?
Actually, yes. There is one policy area he defends without reservation, and that is deregulation.
Okay.
Assuming, of course, that it is implemented genuinely and consistently.
Let's explore the mechanics of that. Why does deregulation get the Hayek stamp of approval?
Because reducing the sheer weight of bureaucratic rules that strangle small businesses is exactly what a healthy economy needs to innovate. Hayek views market competition not just as a tool to lower prices for consumers, but as an essential discovery process. A discovery process. Let's break that down.
Yeah, he says competition is how knowledge is actually discovered and distributed in a society.
It essentially means that the knowledge of how to improve society isn't concentrated in the minds of a few government experts in the room somewhere, right? It's dispersed across millions of everyday people.
Exactly. Like, think of a guy working in his garage who might figure out a completely new, vastly cheaper way to manufacture a battery.
Right. But he can only share that knowledge with society if he is legally allowed to enter the market and compete.
And a massive, heavy regulatory state often acts as an impenetrable wall that keeps that guy in his garage from ever entering the market in the first place.
Because of the red tape.
Right. Think about compliance costs. If a new law requires a 10,000-page environmental review and millions of dollars in legal fees just to open a factory,
a massive multi-billion-dollar incumbent corporation can easily afford that. To them, it's just a minor line item.
Yeah, it's nothing to them. But to the startup in the garage, that regulation is a fatal barrier to entry.
So it's kind of like, think of a sports analogy. It's like removing biased referees from the field so that anyone from any team can play the game fairly.
That's a good way to look at it.
But the danger, and the thing Hayek warns about, is letting the reigning championship team write their own rulebook just to keep the rookies off the field entirely. So how does Hayek suggest we tell the difference between good and bad deregulation?
Well, he warns that we must examine the mechanics of any deregulation effort to see if it creates genuine openness. Does it actually remove the compliance costs that crush the little guy?
Right.
Or does this deregulation simply mean removing oversight for the massive incumbent corporations who are already powerful enough to lobby for the rule changes?
Because if it just removes the rules for the giants so they can monopolize the market further and crush small competitors, well, that isn't expanding the domain of individual choice either.
Not at all.
It's corporatism masquerading as a free market.
Exactly. The outcome must be a genuine structural opening of the market to new players, new ideas, and that discovery process we talked about. Anything less is just a different flavor of cronyism.
Wow. Okay, so when we pull back the lens on all of this, we've gone through the mechanical realities of tariffs acting as hidden consumption taxes. We've hit the delayed inflation trap of unfunded tax cuts. We looked at the bizarre contradiction of expanding central planning while cutting domestic agencies.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have. And we finished with the nuanced, critical promise of genuine deregulation. So how does Hayek synthesize all of these threats? Where does this specific economic direction ultimately lead a society?
He brings it all together with a very quiet, almost chilling final warning in the source text.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He reminds the interviewer that he titled his 1944 book The Road to Serfdom, not the destination.
It's a road. So you can travel down it for a while, and theoretically you can still turn back.
You can, but the longer you travel down that road, the harder it becomes to reverse course. And the fundamental mechanism that keeps a society marching down that road is dependency.
Dependency.
Yes. When governments accustom their citizens and their industries to looking upward for their economic survival, they are actively creating dependency.
Because whether you are a union worker relying on a left-wing state subsidy to keep your factory open,
Right.
or you're a manufacturer relying on a right-wing state-enforced tariff to keep your competitors out,
Right.
you're entirely dependent on the government pulling the levers.
Exactly. Dependency is the soil in which the slow, quiet loss of freedom grows. Hayek points out that in 1944, he wrote his book specifically to warn the world against the dangers of central planning coming from the political left.
Right, the socialist.
But today, looking at these modern policies, he says he would write the exact same warnings about economic nationalism coming from the political right.
So the ideology might be totally different. The political speeches might sound like the exact opposite of socialism, but the underlying mechanics of state control are identical.
Identical.
And if the government has the power to pull a lever to artificially save your business today, they inherently possess the power to pull a lever and destroy your business tomorrow.
That is the ultimate structural vulnerability. You have traded the organic, decentralized, resilient choices of a free market for a fragile system where a central authority dictates your economic reality. The road looks different, but it leads to the exact same place.
You know, thinking back to our opening thought about bringing a historical titan to the present day, what really strikes me is how this analytical framework completely shatters the usual exhausting way we consume the news.
It really does. It changes everything.
Yeah. As you, the listener, navigate your career, plan your investments, or just try to understand the mechanics of the global economy, this Hayekian perspective invites you to completely ignore the partisan labels.
Just toss them out.
Exactly. It doesn't matter if the banner says left or right. Instead, it demands that you look at the mechanics and ask a single, incredibly powerful question of any new policy.
Which is,
does this make me more independent or does this make me more dependent?
it is a profound razor that cuts through the noise entirely. It ignores the talking points and focuses solely on the actual shift in power between the individual and the state.
And it leaves us with something pretty heavy to chew on as we wrap this up.
Yeah, what's that?
Well, if both ends of the traditional political spectrum, socialism on the left and economic nationalism on the right, ultimately rely on the exact same underlying mechanism of state-enforced dependency.
Right.
Is it even possible for a modern, vastly complex global society to exist without some form of central planning? Or, to use his phrasing, have we already traveled too far down the road to serfdom to ever truly turn back?
That is the defining economic question of our time.
It really is.
Yeah.
Keep questioning the consensus, keep looking at the mechanics, and thanks for joining us on this deep dive.